Thank you very much, Madam Secretary. I want to call this afternoon's meeting of the Senate Committee on Legislative Operations and Elections to order. Madam Secretary, we do have a quorum. Please mark Majority Leader Canizaro present when she arrives. We're going to open the hearing on Assembly Bill 315. Thank you, Assemblyman O'Neill, for being here.
Thank you, Chair, for having me, and committee members. I appreciate the time today. I know we're rushed, so I'm going to give you a very short statement on AB 315, a bill relating to mental health incidents or support for our first responders. For the record, I'm P.K. O'Neill, Assemblyman for Assembly District 40, which covers all of Carson City and parts of southeast Washoe County. The proposed legislation that I have before you today seeks to require employing agencies to provide mental health, post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, and suicide prevention information to their employees and provide a maximum of 2 hours with a mental health expert upon retirement to learn or deal with the symptoms of mental health incidences such as alcoholism, suicide, and mainly post-traumatic stress syndrome. For some background, I'll say that suicide, was in law enforcement for 40 years, starting in 1972. I can tell you personally that since I became an officer many years ago, law enforcement and firefighters have for years been competing almost for the #1 spot in suicides across our country. I see the importance of that. I've had friends, unfortunately, people that I've worked with commit suicide. And so that's what brought me to bring forth this bill. I appreciate your support. And in short, as I said to Ways and Means the other day, it's a good bill doing good stuff, and we need to get it going. So with that, I would be available for any questions, unless you want a further explanation into this bill.
Assemblyman O'Neill, we're so lucky that you're here. We don't have too many former law enforcement officers serving the legislature. Thank you for bringing the bill. Members, any questions? I don't see any questions. Appreciate the bill. And with that, I'd like to go to support. Anyone who's in support of Assembly Bill 315 here in the committee room, and then we'll go to the phone lines.
Thank you, Chair. Members of the committee, my name is Steve Gramis. I'm the president of the Las Vegas Police Protective Association. I'm also a police officer with the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. I represent approximately 3,500 commissioned law enforcement officers down in Southern Nevada. We appreciate Assemblyman O'Neill bringing this bill forward. It is a problem what our officers see throughout their entire career, and typically while they're there, officers take the stance that, well, I'm too tough to talk about my feelings. But it's long been my feeling that when they leave, they're far more prone to have that true discussion to make sure they're mentally prepared to deal with retirement. As they lose the friendships, the camaraderie, the fast pace of the job, it will affect them. And so the hope of this bill is that those officers take that 2 hours, really set themselves up to be prepared mentally for retirement and live a long and healthy life and draw down from our PERS as long as they can. So we appreciate the bill and we appreciate your support. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gramis. Any questions, members? Good afternoon, sir. Please go ahead.
Hello, Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Troyce Crumme, Troyce Krumme. I am the Vice Chairman of the Las Vegas Police Managers and Supervisors Association. Rising in support of this bill. I'd like to thank Assemblyman O'Neill for bringing this forward. After 20 years in law enforcement, I can tell you that I have personally seen and read too many stories of law enforcement, first responding professionals having trouble dealing with some of the feelings that come about in this profession and deciding to take their own life. I think that this is an important moment in time that we're taking the stigma of mental health and bringing it out of the darkness and into the light, and I would request this committee's support for this bill. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Thank you for your testimony. Thank you, sir. Anyone else in support here in the committee room in Carson City? All right, not seeing anyone else come up. Broadcasting, can we go to the phone lines for support of Assembly Bill 315?
Chair, at this time, the line is open and working, however, it is empty.
Thank you, broadcasting. We'll now go to Back to the committee room. Opposition, anyone who's opposed to the measure and wants to be heard on the record here in the committee room? I don't see anyone coming up in the committee room. Broadcasting, can we go to the phone lines? Anyone who's in opposition to Assembly Bill 315?
Yes, Chair, the line is open and working, however, it is empty at this time.
Thank you very much, Broadcasting. Now we'd like to go back to the committee room in Carson City. Anyone who's neutral on the measure wants to be heard on the record? I don't see anyone coming forward in Carson City. Broadcasting, can we go to the phone lines for neutral testimony on Assembly Bill 315?
Yes, Chair, at this time, the line is open and working, however, it is empty.
Thank you very much, Broadcasting. And Assemblyman O'Neill, any closing comments you'd like to make?
Thank you, Chair and Committee. I just want to include one thing. I forgot to say, we had an amendment that also included the correctional officers, since they experienced so much of similar incidences during their career, and it's strictly for retirees. So it's a person that has served 20, 25 years and is retiring. It's not mandatory for them it's an offering to participate, to learn. And as I said, and as it was presented to you in support testimony, it's really, this happens after you left the job. And I can attest to that personally, without going into great detail, even now, how it affects me at times. So I just would ask you very strongly to please support this and help me on the floor to get it moving forward. And with that, that would conclude my statements. And I would ask, after you close testimony, I would like to make a comment on the upcoming bill and then leave. I've got to get to a committee meeting upstairs, please.
Thank you very much, Assemblyman O'Neill. Thank you for bringing the bill. Thank you for your service to our state, both in the legislature and as a law enforcement officer protecting our citizens. I'd close the hearing on Assembly Bill 315. Members, is there an appetite to move this bill today? I'd accept a motion.
Yes, Chair. I move that we amend, is it amend and do pass?
I think it's just do pass here, because
Just
your
do
amendment was
pass
added in
and
the Assembly.
Do pass.
Thank you. I have a motion from Vice Chair Lang. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a second from Senator Buck. Is there any discussion on the motion? Not seeing any discussion?
Could I
Vice
just
Chair
say,
Lang.
I just think this, I just want to get this on the record, that I think this is so important. And when we talked yesterday, and I went back up and read the bill, and I just think it's so important that we do this for people that give service and do great things for our communities. And thank you so much for bringing it forward.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Any, Senator Buck? No, all those in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Madam Secretary, please note that it passed with 3 affirmative votes, and excused Senator Severs-Gansert and Majority Leader Canizaro are excused. And I'd like to give the floor statement to Vice Chair Lang. And thank you. Thank you, Assemblyman, for bringing the bill, and appreciate your hard work on this measure.
Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Vice Chair Lang.
Yeah, so I just wanted to say one more thing, because I know you're running places and we're running places. If you need any help on the floor, just let us know.
I appreciate that greatly. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you very much. And now I'd like to open the hearing on Assembly Bill 65. And before we go to our presenters, with everyone's indulgence, Chair Wallen and Ms. Chase, I wonder if I could allow Assemblyman O'Neill to make some brief comments as a former member of the Ethics Commission. He represented me. He wanted to make some comments in support of the bill. Then he has to run over to Assembly Judiciary. So I know it's a little out of the ordinary, but if I could allow him to make some brief comments in support of the bill, and then I'll go to the presenters. Thank you. Assemblyman O'Neill.
Thank you, Chair and committee members. I know this is putting the cart in front of the horse, but we only have 4 hours left. AB 65, you're going to hear testimony on it coming up shortly. I served 4 years on our State Ethics Commission. Unfortunately, during that time and prior, I was involved with incidences involving legislators on ethics, alleged ethics violations. There's an amendment to AB 65 separating out the legislature from the authority of the State Ethics Commission. And I just wanted to give the support to that. There's several things in the bill I could go into detail in support of, but that particularly because we look at separation of power of the legislative branch, the judicial branch, and the executive branch. And it was difficult. 4 of the members of the committee are appointed by the legislature, as 4 are appointed by the governor. So when a legislature who was involved in an incident would come before, it was always an argument and confusing. Some of them had relationships. I know I had relationships or friendships with some of the legislators, and I had to recuse myself. Some others had to recuse themselves because they were supported by the legislators. We have, in the past, the legislature, I know, has an ethics commission. I was here in 2013 working with LCB, actually, at the time, on an incident with a legislator that had some issues. The legislature actually expelled the person. I just wanted to say the amendment is exactly what we need in that separation. And I do believe that we as legislators can handle our own. I think of law enforcement, the agency. We had internal affairs, or they're also called Office of Professional Responsibility. We'd handle our own incidents. And police, I think we are grown-ups, adults. We are elected officials. We represent our communities. And I just wanted to say I think the amendment is great. And it just clears up and makes, I'm going to say, life, the business of the Ethics Commission, so much simpler and more direct, that they know what to deal with, instead of walking the fine line of when a legislator is or is not subordinate to their authority. So with that, if you have a question, I'd like to answer it for you. Otherwise, I want to thank you for allowing me to give my testimony in support of an excellent bill, coming almost as good as the previous bill.
Unbiased opinion there, I'm sure. Thank you, Assemblyman O'Neill. Thank you for your service on the Ethics Commission in the past, and appreciate your work on both these bills. And please, I don't want to keep you. I know you've got to run up to Assembly Judiciary, so thank you. Thank you so much for being here.
Now I turn it over to some excellent hands.
Thank you. With that, thank you, Assemblyman O'Neill. Thank you very much. And thank you for your indulgence, Chair Wallen and Ms. Chase. I know it's been kind of touch and go today with our schedule, but we have a little break here before we all go back to floor. And I thank you for taking the time to present Assembly Bill 65.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. For the record, I am Kim Wallen, Chair of the Nevada State Commission on Ethics. With citizens having less and less trust in government, now more than ever, we need to place a greater emphasis on ethics to help restore that trust. AB 65 will help to do that by improving the protection of whistleblowers, which is very important, especially now. In fact, in the 2020 Global Business Ethics Survey from the Ethics and Compliance Initiative, they found the highest percentage ever for reporting misconduct, but they're also seeing a tremendous increase in retaliation. Retaliation has tripled since 2013 and doubled since 2017, and it continues to get worse. We're also seeing a 20-year high for employees being pressured to bend the rules and commit wrongdoing. AB 65 will also streamline some of our processes, allowing us to operate more efficiently. It also provides additional due process for the individuals who have had a complaint filed against them. Thank you for your consideration of this bill, and now I will have Commission Counsel Tracy Chase give you the highlights of the bill and answer any questions you may have. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Chair Wallen, and thank you for your continued service to our state. I think it's probably, I don't think it's so rare, someone with your experience in state government chairing the Ethics Commission. Thank you very much. Ms. Chase, unless there are any questions for Chair Wallen or Ms. Chase, thank you.
Thank you, Tracy Chase, Commission Counsel for the record. Good evening. I would like to first thank the committee and the chair for your consideration today. I will provide a very abbreviated presentation on Assembly Bill 65 because I know how busy you are this evening, and both the chair and I are available for questions. AB 65 is an important legislation for the Commission because it addresses a number of procedural issues that the Commission has faced in the past few years. Essentially, the bill serves to clarify 3 areas of the Nevada ethics and government law associated with ethics complaints, advisory opinions, the ethical standards of conduct, and administrative matters. Starting with requests for ethics complaints and advisory opinions, the bill clarifies and enhances procedure for transparency and whistleblower protections for certain requesters of ethics complaint. It authorizes the executive director and the commission counsel to provide immediate, informal, confidential advice to public officers or public employees, which may be relied on by them and which is also subject to review by the commission. On the ethical standards of conduct, the bill does make some changes to the cooling off period by limiting it to those at the higher level of management. AB 65 further confirms that a public officer or public employee's duties relating to disclosure and abstention under the ethics law would not extend to revealing confidential information that is otherwise protected by law. Some administrative changes are set forth in the bill as well. It clarifies that the confidentiality protections for both advisory opinions and the processes related to ethics complaint hearings, the extent of those. It establishes other procedural requirements of government entities related to acknowledgement of statutory ethical standards form that requires agencies to provide to the Commission the same list of public officers, either appointed or elected, as are provided to the Secretary of State. I wanted to highlight 2 amendments worked out with stakeholders, and I will defer to LCB to discuss the amendment number 777 relating to the creation of the Legislative Ethics Act. One of the amendments I wanted to bring your attention to is the amendment to Section 8 of the bill, which exempts those public officers and employees that provide representation to subject of ethics complaints from the witness cooperation measures set forth in the bill. The other amendment is to Section 22 to remove the requirement that the executive director be an attorney. That will not harm the Commission because they can always have that preference in hiring. With that, I will reserve myself for any questions that the committee may have on the bill. Thank you very much, Chair Arnshaw.
Thank you very much, Chair Wallen and Ms. Chase. Members, are there any questions right now? I think the only question I have here is I'm looking at page 53 of the first reprint, section 46, in terms of the documents that would be kept confidential if the commission decides to keep the identity of the requester confidential. How would that be a change from current law in terms of those documents, those records?
Well, current law, basically in advisory opinions, they are already maintained as confidential unless the subject of the advisory opinion would waive the confidentiality. But in that section, and I believe it relates to whether or not we can provide information to other agencies, and it would maintain the confidentiality on those matters that are sent to other agencies.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Chase. I'm not seeing any additional questions. I thank you so much for your presentation. Now I believe we have our counsel, Mr. Powers. Thank you for joining us. Good to see you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Kevin Powers, General Counsel, LCB Legal. As you know, the LCB Legal Division is a nonpartisan legal agency. We do not support or oppose any particular policy, viewpoint, or piece of legislation. Instead, we provide the legislature and its members with objective legal analysis and advice on issues of law, including the legal effects of proposed legislation. In addition, the statute governing the Legislative Counsel Bureau allows the officers of the Legislative Counsel Bureau, including General Counsel, to make recommendations to the legislature when the piece of legislation affects the operations of the LCB. And in this case, the amendment that was adopted by the Assembly dealing with the Nevada Legislative Ethics Law has an impact on the Legislative Counsel Bureau. So I am authorized under law to answer questions on any impacts that may have on the LCB. Just so it's clear, the amendment adopted by the Assembly, Amendment 777, included all of the components that Ms. Chase mentioned. In particular, the two amendments requested by the Ethics Commission, they were included in those sections, as Ms. Chase mentioned. In addition, sections 55 through 112 were added by Amendment 777 in the Assembly. And that's what I'm going to focus on, provide an objective legal analysis and overview of the legal effects of that part of the bill as it stands now. Starting with Section 56, it establishes that this now will going to be the Nevada Legislative Ethics Law, and it will be codified in Title 17, which governs the legislative branch of government. Before I move into some of the details of the sections, it's important to have some background on the role of each house of the legislature with regard to ethics and discipline of its members. Under Article 4, Section 6 of the Nevada Constitution, each house has exclusive and plenary constitutional powers to adopt the rules of its proceedings and discipline its members, and with the concurrence of 2/3 of its members, expel a legislator from their appropriate house. Because of that constitutional power and the fact that it's exclusive, certain areas of ethics are within the exclusive jurisdiction of each house, and those are core legislative functions. An example of those core legislative functions are ethics provisions dealing with voting, disclosure of conflicts of interest, and abstention. Those are core legislative functions within the exclusive jurisdiction of each house and therefore cannot be delegated to a body like the Commission on Ethics in the executive branch of government. In addition, there are non-core legislative functions where the houses and the Commission on Ethics share concurrent jurisdiction over those ethical matters. In those cases, if there's an ethical violation, a legislator or a legislator officer or employee could be subject to discipline by the House of the Legislature and by the Commission on Ethics. Some examples of non-core legislative functions that are subject to the ethics laws are the prohibition on a legislator using governmental time, property, equipment, or services for a personal purpose. There's prohibitions on legislators and other employees entering into contracts with state and local government. And there's prohibition on legislators and other employees receiving honorarium, which is a fee for a speech or appearance. Those are non-core legislative functions in which there's concurrent jurisdiction with the houses and the Ethics Commission. What sections 55 through 112 of the legislation will do is enact the Nevada Legislative Ethics Law and make all ethical provisions subject to the jurisdiction of the houses. And what the bill creates is a Senate Ethics Commission, a Assembly Ethics Commission, and a Joint Ethics Commission. And so that legislators and all legislative officers and employees with regard to ethical matters will be subject to the exclusive jurisdiction of the legislative branch of government, and they will not be subject to the jurisdiction of the Ethics Commission, whose jurisdiction will remain over employees and officers of the executive branch of government and local political subdivisions. So with that in mind, the goal then, of course, is to ensure that the existing ethical standards that are in NRS Chapter 281A, which is what is administered by the Ethics Commission, continue to apply to the legislative branch of government. What that means is that you'll see, obviously, a lot of new language in sections 55 through 112. However, a good portion of that is copying the existing provisions from Chapter 281A of NRS and moving them into this new chapter in Title 17 governing the state legislative department. So it looks like a lot of new language. but all of it is the same existing statutory ethical standards that currently apply to legislators and for which LCB obviously provides legislators with training throughout the year, and in particular at the beginning of each legislative session. So although it looks like a lot of new language, it in fact is just codifying these standards in the chapter governing the Legislative Department of Government. So turning then to the actual provisions of the bill, which Section 57 establishes the statement of legislative intent that the purposes of this legislative ethics law is to establish the highest standards of ethical behavior founded upon principles of dignity, decorum, civility, and respect, to prohibit any conduct that creates the appearance of impropriety, and to prohibit any improper, inappropriate, or dishonorable conduct that is unbecoming to the legislative process or undermines the people's faith, trust, and confidence in the integrity of the legislative process. So that's the overarching goal of the legislative ethics law, is to ensure the highest standards of ethical behavior are practiced in the legislature. Sections 58 through 77 establish definitions for the legislative ethics law. And again, a lot of these definitions are taken verbatim from Chapter 281A of NRS and now will be applied in this chapter governing the legislative department. Sections 78 and 82 establish the jurisdictional standing of each of the various commissions that I mentioned, the Senate Commission, the Assembly Commission, and the Joint Commission. What it provides is that each of those commissions will have jurisdiction to investigate and take appropriate actions regarding an alleged violation of the legislative ethical standards by a legislative officer or employee on any ethics complaint that's filed within 2 years after the alleged violation or reasonable discovery of the alleged violation. That 2-year statute of limitations matches the existing statute of limitations in the ethics law in Chapter 281A of NRS. In addition, Sections 78 and 82 make clear that the statutory ethical standards in this new chapter will supplement the existing ethical standards in the rules adopted by each house and the joint rules adopted by both houses. And there are ethical standards currently in Senate Standing Rule 23, Assembly Standing Rule 23, and the joint standing rules which create the legislative code of ethical standards. So this is going to be statutory ethical standards that supplement existing rule-based ethical standards, and the statutes provide if there's a conflict, then the provisions of the rules prevail and control because the rules are adopted under Article 4, Section 6 of the Nevada Constitution, and thereby those rules take precedence over statutes in those matters that govern each of the houses. The next group of sections is 83 through 90. These, again, are the existing statutory ethical standards from the ethics law in NRS Chapter 281A, and they're reproduced here and revised so they only apply to legislative officers and employees, but these standards exist already, and the legislative officer and employee will continue to have to comply with those statutory standards, and again, in addition to the standards that already exist in the standing rules and the joint rules. The next group of sections to discuss is sections 91 through 102. That creates the Senate Commission on Ethics, the Assembly Commission on Ethics, and the Joint Commission on Ethics. The Senate Commission will have jurisdiction over all legislative officers and employees of the Senate. The Assembly Commission will have jurisdiction over all legislative officers and employees of the Assembly. And then the Joint Commission will have jurisdiction over all other legislative officers and employees, which generally means the officers and employees of the Legislative Council Bureau. The reason for that is obviously the LCB is a nonpartisan legal agency, and so we serve both houses of the legislature. So a joint commission formed of members of the Senate and members of the Assembly would be the ones that hear ethics complaints against an officer or employee of the LCB, and therefore both houses would be contributing to that ethical review. Sections 91 and 102 establish the membership of each of those commissions, the provisions for alternate members, the provisions for vacancies, payment of members, all these standard statutory provisions that go along with creating legislative bodies like this. The next group of sections to talk about is sections 103 to 112. This establishes the procedures for conducting investigations of ethical violations. Sections 103 to 112 provide for the filing of an ethics complaint by an individual and the review of that ethics complaint that is then determined which appropriate body shall hear it, the Senate Commission, the Assembly Commission, or the Joint Commission. And there's a procedure for each of those commissions to conduct adjudicatory hearings if necessary. And also there's remedies and penalties involved from issuing letters of caution and instruction to admonishments and reprimand and censure, the imposition of civil penalties, and the referral of the matter to each respective house for if it's a legislator and they're subject to the jurisdiction of their house. So because each house only has the punishment power of expelling a legislator, the commissions here could make recommendations on certain penalties, but only the house could exercise the ultimate penalty of expulsion from that particular house. And finally, the last section, section 112, makes it clear, and this is also a provision that's in the ethics law in 281A, that these provisions do not abrogate or decrease the effect of any provisions of NRS which define crimes or prescribe punishments with respect to the conduct of legislative officers and employees. So obviously, a legislative officer or employee who commits an ethical violation is subject to the jurisdiction of these three ethics commissions, subject to potential jurisdiction of the House, and also subject to the potential jurisdiction of criminal prosecution. So again, the point of the amendment is to capture all the existing provisions that govern legislative ethics that exist in 281A of NRS, move them to a new chapter, and then have that chapter administered by the Senate Commission, the Assembly Commission, the Joint Commission, and if necessary, each house of the legislature. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's an overview of the bill. I'm certainly open for any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Powers. Members, are there any questions for our counsel, Mr. Powers? Senator Buck.
Thank you so much, Chair Orenshaw, and sorry, I'm a little new to this, but what if the complaint is against filed against the Speaker or the Majority Leader, or both?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Kevin Powers, General Counsel, LCB Legal. The Speaker or the Majority Leader are members of the legislature, and they are subject to the same disciplinary power as any other member of the legislature. So if a complaint was filed against the Majority Leader or the Speaker, it would be submitted to the Legislative Council, who would review the matter with the chair of the appropriate commission, either the Senate Commission or Assembly Commission. If, perchance, the Speaker or the Majority Leader was the chair of that commission, they would be disqualified from participating in this matter, and the Legislative Council would consult with the Vice Chair. After such consultation, if it was determined that the commission had jurisdiction in the matter and an investigation was warranted, then the investigation against the Speaker or the Majority Leader would go forward, and they obviously could not participate in the investigation. And if the respective commission determined that an adjudicatory hearing was necessary, then the adjudicatory hearing against the Speaker or Majority Leader would occur. And if they were found to have committed a violation, they'd be subject to punishment by the respective Senate Commission or Ethics Commission, or Assembly Ethics Commission. And in addition, they would be subject to potential punishment by their House. No member of the legislature is excluded from punishment by their own House or under this bill by a Senate Commission or an Assembly Commission. All legislators, regardless of their position or status, are subject to the disciplinary authority of their House. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Senator Buck.
Thank you, Chair Orenshaw. So basically, if you control the majority, then the people in that body will be able to decide whether it's ethical or not. It just seems like there's a conflict of interest, but maybe I'm not reading it right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, for the record, Kevin Powers, General Counsel, LCB Legal. Article 4, Section 6 of the Nevada Constitution gives each House exclusive powers to discipline and expel its members. That provision of the Nevada Constitution is modeled on the federal Constitution, which contains a similar provision. As it stands now, members of Congress are each subject to discipline by their own House, and each House of Congress has standing ethics committees that review ethical complaints against members and determine whether to investigate those complaints, and if they do, determine whether to punish the legislators for unethical behavior. Each house of the federal legislature has punished its members regularly when they have engaged in unethical behavior. In addition, those members are subject to the ordinary criminal process if their ethical violations rose to criminal violations. And the case reporters are filled with cases, unfortunately, against several federal legislators who have been involved in ethical violations who have ultimately faced criminal prosecution. So the process that's set forth in Section 55 to 112 of this legislation is not unusual. In fact, it's what the framers of the Nevada Constitution contemplated by giving each house exclusive power over the discipline of its members. The framers determined that each house should conduct its proceedings to ensure that they're ethical and that each member is invested with the power to determine for themselves whether another member's conduct violates ethical standards. So if the majority leader or the speaker or any other member of the legislature were to commit an ethical violation right now without this legislation, they'd be subject to punishment by their house. This legislation also gives the additional punishment from the Senate Commission, the Assembly Commission, and the Joint Commission created by this legislation. But again, this is not an unusual structure. It's actually what the framers contemplated and what the federal government follows in the U.S. Congress. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Powers. Members, any additional questions for Mr. Powers? One question I have, and maybe I'm missing it in the bill, is in the existing ethics statutes, I believe that someone who's perhaps a government employee or a member of a board can ask for an opinion from their counsel, and then if at a later date the Ethics Commission disagreed with that attorney's opinion, they I don't know if safe harbor is the right word, but they're allowed to show the Ethics Commission that they did seek advice of their counsel. Is there a parallel here in the new language that it would apply to legislators, or would legislators need to request an opinion from either the House Commission or the Joint Commission, or could they still ask for an opinion from the Legislative Council? Would they be protected if they did? And then
Thank
if
you,
the
Mr.
commission
Chairman.
disagreed with the Legislative Council?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Kevin Powers, General Counsel, LCB Legal. There is a provision in the ethics law that provides a sort of safe harbor if before the act occurs, the public officer employee gets legal advice from the counsel for the public employer they work for, and if that advice is consistent with the published opinions of the commission, then if they're found to have committed a violation, that determination that they sought an opinion and followed it will reduce the violation from a willful violation to a non-willful violation. There's a proposal in this legislation that would change that slightly for the Ethics Commission. That being said, there's no similar provision that was included in sections 55 to 112, which is the legislative ethics law. The reason for that is right now under statute, the members of the legislature can seek the advice of LCB Legal, and we can now provide that advice already on matters of ethics and other matters of law. It will be up to the Senate Commission and the Assembly Commission and the Joint Commission to determine what weight to give LCB Legal's advice when they provide that advice to the particular legislator. However, we expect that because the legislature generally follows the advice of LCB Legal, that each of the respective commissions would afford deference to LCB Legal's interpretation of the statutory ethical standards and the standards in the rules of each house. And that's how we generally proceed now. So we didn't believe there was a necessary element to statutorily codify, which a process exists already for LCB Legal to provide that legal advice and for the legislative branch to give deference to that legal advice.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Powers. No, I don't see any additional questions. Well, thank you, Mr. Powers. Appreciate your presentation of the latter half of Assembly Bill 65 as amended. And I believe we have some more presenters on Zoom. Perhaps I'm mistaken. Maybe we,
Mr. Chair, David Hall is not presenting from the Ethics Commission, so.
all right. Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Chairwoman. Thank you. Well, unless members have any additional questions for Chair Wallen, Ms. Chase, or Mr. Powers, I will go to support here in the committee room. Anyone who wishes to speak in support of Assembly Bill 65, thanks for your patience.
Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is David Daslich, Director of Government Affairs for the Vegas Chamber. It's been a long-standing legislative priority of the Chamber to support legislation that promotes good governance through ethical procedures. We'd like to thank the Ethics Commission for all their good work on this. We believe that this bill does promote transparency and accountability, and we are in support. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Taslich. Members, any questions? Not seeing any. Anyone else in support here in Carson City? Broadcasting, if we can go to the phone lines for support of Assembly Bill 65.
Chair, the line is open and working, however, it is empty at this time.
Thank you. We'll come back to the committee room here in Carson City. We'll go to opposition. Anyone who is opposed to Assembly Bill 65 and wants to testify on the record. I'm not seeing anyone come forward here in the committee room. Broadcasting, can we go to the phone lines? Opposition on Assembly Bill 65.
Yes, Chair, the line is open and working, however, it is empty at this time.
Right, thank you very much, Broadcasting. We'll come back to the committee room one more time. Neutral. Anyone who's neutral on the measure and wants to speak on the record? Here in the committee room? Don't see anyone here in the committee room. Broadcasting, can we go to the phone lines? Neutral on Assembly Bill 65.
Yes, Chair, the line is open and working, however, it is empty at this time.
Right, thank you, Broadcasting. And Chair Wallen, Ms. Chase, Mr. Powers, any closing comments you'd like to make on the bill? We appreciate you being here and presenting it.
I just want to say thank you very much for your time, and I think this is a very good bill, and I hope it gets passed and goes through. So thank you so much for your support in all these years as well, Mr. Chair.
Well, thank you. Thank you for your hard work on this measure. Thank you, Ms. Chase. Thank you, Mr. Powers. With that, we'll close the hearing on Assembly Bill 65, and I am missing two of my members right now, so I believe we'll go to public comment, and then we'll take a recess, and we will hopefully meet either later in the committee room or maybe down on the floor. Any public comment here in the committee room? Anyone who wishes to make public comment? Broadcasting, if we can go to the phone line. We don't have any public comment here in the committee room, but if there's anyone on the phone lines who'd like to make public comment.
Yes, Chair, the line is open and working, however, the public comment lobby is empty at this time.
Okay, thank you. With that, we are going to be at ease for just a moment. Members, we'll come back to order. Thank you for all sticking around. We just heard Assembly Bill 65, and given our impending adjournment of session tomorrow night, I wonder if there'd be an appetite to move this right now.
So moved.
I have a do pass motion from Vice Chair Lang. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a second from Senator Buck. Any discussion on the motion? No discussion. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Madam Secretary, please note that it passed with 3 in the affirmative, and Majority Leader Canizaro, Senator Seaver-Scansert are excused. With that, we will once again be in a recess, and we probably don't have any other work to do, but if we do, it'll be real short and on the floor most likely. Thank you, members, for being so flexible. Thank you. We're going to come back to order for the Senate Committee on Legislative Operations and Elections. We were in a brief recess. We are now adjourned.